Turning the tables on annoying telemarketers is always a beautiful way to get some pro-revenge. We've got a story on that one in just a bit, but first, my aunt keeps borrowing my makeup, so I let her borrow the wrong one. My aunt's been staying with us for a few weeks while her place is getting fumigated. She was supposed to be here just for the weekend, but you know how that goes. Somehow, it turned into her moving into our guest room and treating the whole house like her personal shopping mall. She's been helping herself to my clothes, my snacks, and most annoyingly, my makeup. I told her nicely, more than once, please stop using my makeup. That stuff isn't cheap, and you don't even ask. She'd just laugh and say, oh, come on, you have so much, you won't even notice. Well, I noticed, every time. So one day, I switched out the label on an old concealer tube with one that matched my current shade. The old one was way too light, borderline ghostly. I left it sitting on top of my vanity like bait. Sure enough, I hear her in the bathroom later that day, humming while doing it to her face. Didn't say a word. Next week, she shows up to a family dinner wearing full glam and her under eyes were blinding, like glow-in-the-dark white. In every picture, she looked like a raccoon in reverse. She pulled me aside and asked, did you change something in your makeup? Mine looked weird. I just smiled and said, oh, maybe it wasn't your shade after all, but I'm sure you won't even notice. She stared at me for a second, like she was trying to figure out if I was messing with her. Then she just huffed, muttered something under her breath about people being sneaky, and stomped off to her room. She still stays with us now and then, but funny enough, she hasn't touched a single thing of mine again. Yeah, so it's one thing to just use the makeup without asking, but I think once OP asked her to stop and she continued, you're just setting yourself up. You're teeing yourself off for a little revenge here, so totally warranted. Different take for you replied, you handled that quite cleverly. In the future, keep a bottle just for when she visits that you can leave for her to find and use. Keep playing the game. And OP replied to this, honestly, that's not a bad idea. I might just make a whole fake beauty stash labeled for guests and stock it with expired testers. If she's gonna keep playing, I'll bring bonus rounds. Also, hey everybody, my name is Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these pro-revenge videos, it would be amazing if you like the video or commented down below if you're listening to our podcast. Now then, our next story is, I poured a drink on a girl's head. I, 28-year-old male, was at a music festival that I'd been looking forward to for months with two friends. There's no assigned seating at the outdoor venue, and there are a few hundred people. While the opener was on, I went to get 3 drinks for me and my friends. A beer can in one hand and 2 open plastic cups in the other. On my way back to try and find my friends, the main artist was starting. The cheering and music was amazing. The energy was exactly what I had been looking forward to, and the crowd was all trying to get closer to the stage. I was bumped and split a bit on myself and another girl. She was not happy and tried to say something to me, but I couldn't hear. I apologized the best I could, knowing she likely couldn't hear me, and tried to continue through the crowd. When I turned away, she grabbed my hand and wrestled 2 of the drinks from me, only to throw them on the floor, spilling more on both of us and everyone around us. I couldn't believe what was happening and looked back at her trying to understand why. When I saw her and the grin on her face, I knew why. So I took my 3rd drink, the full beer can, and poured it on her head. I then immediately turned around to head back to the bar and get more drinks. I heard people yelling behind me, asking, what was that? But realized as I went to defend myself what I had really just done and how nobody around us would have seen the first part of the interaction. So I kept walking and didn't look back. Yeah, you hear this with children all the time. It's always the one that retaliates that's the one that is caught and ultimately blamed and punished. So yeah, that's just the way the world turns. Dear News 5693 replied, good, I think more people should non-violently be retaliating against these hideous adult mean girls. If you want to feel safe in this world, don't act like a POS. Our next story is Operation Depth Charge. So we're in Virginia Beach for a vacation, and we rented one of those Surrey bikes. My wife and I are doing all the pedaling because my kids really aren't much help. Also, my oldest son, who's too young to control the Surrey, is benching that he isn't in the driver's seat. Tension is high, but we're powering through it. Near the end of our journey, when we're sweating bullets, noonish, is when the initial altercation occurs between me and this absolute jerk. If you've been to Virginia Beach, there's a dedicated bike path and signs just about every 10 feet stating that only bikes are allowed on the bike path and only pedestrians are allowed on the boardwalk. It's also painted on the ground that the bike path is for bikes only. A guy on foot is walking lazily down the path and he's just not crossing. Also, he's not paying attention to people behind him at all. We're pedaling up slowly, and we can't really go around him because there are bikes coming in the opposite direction. And I know I said tension is high, but I was extremely polite when I said, "Excuse us, this thing is hard to turn and stop." He turns around and glares at us and then decides to just stare us down as we're approaching. Again, we're moving slowly, so we're slowing down. And I say, "Could you just step off for a moment?" And he says, "You need to yield to pedestrians." And I say, "We came to a stop, didn't we? But this is the bike path. There's a sign right next to you." And then a woman behind me on a bike shouts, "I'm from here. You should be on the boardwalk, not on the bike path, jerk," which escalated the incident. Anyway, we get by this guy and he starts screaming, "Freak you, bench," to the third-party lady on the bike, and then starts saying, "Freak you and your family," to me and my kids. As we're pedaling slowly away, this guy seemed like he was just looking for trouble, so we just pedaled away. Anyway, around check-in, 3 p.m. time at my hotel, I'm returning to the room with some sand toys, and my stomach is kind of turning a bit from about 4 days of eating beach vacation food. And I passed a little bit of gas outside, and it was bad. So I'm pretty anxious to get into a bathroom while my kids are at the pool with my wife. In the lobby, of course, there's a long line for the elevator. Only one of the 4 elevators is running. Well, guess who's right behind me with a precariously stacked luggage cart? Same guy from before. I guess he was waiting for his room to be ready and was in a bad mood. I totally get it. But freak this guy for being a jerk to my kids and wife because he was asked to move over for a second. It's my turn to get on the elevator, and it opens up, and I drop a plastic shovel and nudge it under his front wheel just as the elevator was opening. I step on, and there's enough room for him to get on with the luggage cart, but it gets caught on the shovel I dropped, and the cart skids, and a few things drop off the cart, and this guy is blocking the elevator with the luggage cart, trying to pick up the few items while swearing, and the doors begin to close, and I say, "Hey buddy, freak you and your family," and give him the finger as the doors close. I'm about to get off the elevator thinking I got my revenge, but my stomach turned a little bit more, and I decided to rip one of the longest and deadliest farts of my entire life in the elevator before getting off. It was like I crapped on the floor. With the elevator, now an armed warhead, I hit the lobby button and stepped off. I watched the floor indicator as it went down to the first floor and held there. Presumably, this guy gingerly pushed his cart in and was forced to ride up in the heck I created for him. I didn't stick around to see what floor he rode to. Sorry, had to crap. Also, if the guy in this story is reading this, freak you and your family. And if you were in the crowded lobby and uninvolved in this, you were collateral damage in this. I am very sorry. I would say that the battle and the war was won here. Yeah, good story. You got him. Our next story is, a regular kept spoiling a show I was watching. I used to work in a comic shop, and we had a lot of regulars who would come in every week who I got to know fairly well. There was one guy who had mentioned he liked Stargate, so one week he came in and I mentioned to him that I'd started rewatching Stargate from the very beginning. I also mentioned that I'd never seen the last 3 seasons or any of the spin-offs, so I was excited to see them. The first thing he says is, "Oh, so you don't know about..." detailed description of something that happens in the final season. I was like, whoa, spoilers, which should have been enough, but it wasn't. Every week he'd come back and spoil it for me even more, and every week I would tell him to please not spoil it for me. This went on for about 2 months. Between the regularity of it and the smirk he'd get on his face every time I asked him not to tell me spoilers, I knew he was doing it on purpose. So one week, he came in and bought a big pile of comics he'd ordered. I waited for him to pay, and then, instead of bagging them up, I fanned them all out on the counter. You see, I read a lot of comics, especially back then. I read every new comic that was published by Marvel and DC, and then some, as they came out. So it just so happened that I had read every comic he had just purchased. I proceeded to point to each comic and spoil every single one. He didn't talk to me about Stargate after that. First of all, people that knowingly post spoilers absolutely suck. You're the scum of the earth. And secondly, yeah, you gotta fight fire with fire in situations like this. I mean, why would you take any kind of joy in ruining an experience like that for somebody? I'll never understand it. Never. Straight Extreme 966 commented, This happened to me online with a girl who was heck bent on spoiling Star Wars Episode 7 for as many people as possible in an online forum. She mentioned her boyfriend was a massive Star Wars fan and she couldn't spoil it for him because he'd get crappy, so she was doing it to others online for whatever effing reason, getting it out of her system, I guess. I went in her profile and found her BF, messaged him the screenshots of her comments back to him. She messaged me back later and was livid. She went away after that. No remorse from me, even though it was a crappy thing to do. Do not throw stones when you live in a glass house. Our next story is, manager miraculously made me miss 2 days of paycheck and harassed me during her vacation. I made sure everyone that was about to enter the company knew about it so the vacancy wouldn't get filled. I used to work in a state-owned company, and you would only become employed in it if you passed a public selection program. I was in the first batch of people that came in, and there should be 4 other batches. There were a lot of vacancies in the company as well. When I got in, people in my area of expertise got internally interviewed so we would get directed to the company sections that best suited our skills, but we would also be interviewing back the managers. When it was my turn to ask questions about management, I was ensured that there was flexibility regarding work hours, since I regularly took other selection programs away from the city and I would need to be absent from work sometimes or work remotely in different days of the week. I was selected and my manager soon started her vacations. Company policy also stated that we could use our overtime hours to miss a day's work if our manager allowed, and that work-from-home holidays could be changed at the manager's discretion. Not long after, I had to do a public selection that required my absence during a Monday, trip day, and a Tuesday. Exam day would take about 4 hours. I asked to use all the overtime hours I accumulated so I could miss Monday, and then asked if I could work remote from the hotel on Tuesday, since I had no flights that would allow me to get to work. Also, because my usual work from home would be a day in which I would have a remote class that was ordered by my manager, I had yet another reason for the change. Since, if the class was any other day, I would actually get 2 work from home days. The substitute manager apparently went to check with her before allowing it, and I was told I wouldn't be able to use my overtime to miss 1 workday because of an exception to the company policy I was never told about. You could only actually use your OT hours to miss work during holiday season, and it was written in an internal document of my area. Since I had to do that exam, because it was much nicer position, I would take a 1-day hit to my paycheck. On Monday, which was the day previous to my exam, my manager, who was taking vacation time, texted me at 10 p.m., right before I was going to sleep, and told me that I was also not allowed to change my work from home day as well, since 1, it would only be allowed on extraordinary circumstances, and having an exam and wasting my work from home day in a remote class wasn't an excuse, and 2, I also would need to ask for it weeks before. No reason. I told her those things were not what we discussed during the interview and that it was impossible for me to show up on the next day, because there were no flights that would allow me to get to work on time. She also threatened me with a poor review for missing 2 days of work, so I could actually get fired. And even if I wasn't fired, I wouldn't get promoted either. I barely slept because not only I would have a very important exam, but also because if I failed it, I would not only take the position, but could also get fired. Thankfully, the scores were published on Wednesday, the day after, and I managed to get a good enough score to pass, but I likely would have gotten a better one if I had slept well. And scoring better gives you better things at the new position. On the next week, she returned from her vacation, and I gleefully told her I was quitting in about 2 weeks because I passed to that much nicer position. She congratulated me, then almost literally went running to HR so she could ask for one person to fill my position in the next batch of the new hires. One problem, though. A lot of people are not even coming to sign the contract with the company because the pay's not that good given the requirements for the position. So what would be 60 people they could call from the public selection list? Only about 40 are going to come, and I'm the second person in 2 months that was quitting. No one knows when the next public selection process will occur. It might take years for a new one. And here's the revenge part. I told all the people of the next batches that she was a horrible manager and everything she did to undermine me. When she tries to get someone to fill my position, no one will want it, and she's desperate for someone to work under her because there are a lot of people that are going to retire from the company. My former position is very likely going to stay vacant for a very long time, and she's going to get overworked. And my boss can only blame herself for lying to me about flexibility regarding work hours, threatening to give me a bad review and make me miss 2 days' worth of paycheck. Had she allowed me the flexibility I was promised, I would have told everyone how great of a position it was. And to show how much of a jerk she is, in the next week, a coworker, one of the people that are going to retire, asked to change her work from home day because she had to get her dog to the vet because of an emergency. She got the change, even though she asked for it on the very same day she would miss work. Sure, getting your dog to the vet is justifiable, but so were my reasons. Karma definitely took care of business here. You were lied to, dishonest, done dirty, and, ultimately, she got what she deserved. Suat Sepo replied, "The boss was sabotaging you, and that's why she made sure to ruin your sleep day before your exam, threatening to fire you and just making you upset and mess with your head. Glad you were able to persevere despite her attempts. My mom had to endure the very same situation throughout her law degree. Every time she had an exam, bosses and coworkers would make her work a living heck." Our next story is, okay, I'll F off. 10 plus years ago, I did a 3-week road trip across the US. I'm originally from the UK. We met lots of amazing, friendly people. However, this story isn't about one of them. It was around midnight, and we were deciding which bar to go to when I noticed a very drunk guy drop his wallet and scatter his bank cards everywhere. He picked them up with the help of his more sober friend, then he staggers 20 feet, lights his last cigarette, and throws the empty packet back in the direction he just came from before collapsing onto the floor. It was then that I'd noticed he forgot to pick up his driving license. I yell across to him that his driving license is on the floor and point to it. And he yells back, "That's a cigarette packet. Freak off back to England, you freaking F-word." I was pretty taken aback, both by how much of a jerk he was, and because it definitely was a driving license. So I told him, if I'm going to freak off back to England, I'll need a souvenir, and pocketed the license. 2 minutes later, I see his friend running towards me, so I threw the license deep into a hedge. To the friend's credit, he was very apologetic. I vaguely pointed towards the hedge, told him it was somewhere in there, and dipped into a nearby bar. Half an hour later, I came out to see them looking in the hedge about 20 feet from where I threw it. I'd be surprised if they found it. If you're going to treat people like this, you deserve to have your ID thrown in a hedge. Just saying, that's the least that they could do. At least they threw ID in the hedge and not a haymaker at your face. Sunny Skies replied, "Ha! Very nice. A few months ago, a drunk guy was crossing the street slowly in front of my husband and I driving home. We honked at him because it was a super dangerous move and we could hardly see him jaywalking. He in turn threw something at our car. We had no idea what it was until the next day when we found the guy's driver's license stuck between our back window and trunk. Enjoyed knowing that this jerk had a rough go after that poor decision, and I decided to keep his license on my fridge as a souvenir." Our next story is, "Roommate tried to sleep with my fiancé." Me and my fiancé have been couch surfing while waiting for our move-in date. We have all our stuff packed into the vehicle, and we're only 2 weeks away. The last place we were at was with a couple that she knew. The wife is pregnant, and for a few days, things were going well. They gave us a tour of their house and everything, and me and the husband got to flex our cooking muscles together. We got along really well and even exchanged numbers so we could keep in touch. Not long into our stay, however, my fiancé calls me while I'm at work, saying she needs to talk to me as soon as I get off. When she picks up, she tells me she's been in the car all day. She told the roommates that she went shopping. She started crying and told me that the husband had grabbed her butt and tried to get her to sleep with him. My initial reaction was explosive, but when I calmed down, I told her that we can go back and get our stuff. When we got there, the couple was sitting on the couch watching a movie. He called me buddy when I came in, and I had to resist the urge to throw something at him. I told him I needed to shower. Meanwhile, my fiancé quietly grabbed the few things we brought in. In the bedroom, I took a marginally decent crap. To save you the nasty details, the conditions were right for me to scar him for life. He had this overpriced $200 loofah in the shower. I used it to scrub my body. Felt great. Then I used it to clean my unwiped bottom, making sure not to wash it and put it up where he usually hung it. After that amazing shower, I came out and got dressed. I checked on my fiancé in the car and went back in for one last gut punch. I told his wife that he tried sleeping with my fiancé, and to no one's surprise, I find out this isn't the first time. I left in a hurry while they argued, and me and my girl got the heck out of Dodge. I got a text the next day. One of him in all caps. "What is wrong with you?" followed by a picture of his loofah covered in dry fecal matter. I simply sent a laughing emoji and blocked his number. Willow P., I admire your self-control, first of all. I would have wanted to throw this guy's head through a wall. But secondly, I mean, the nerve, the audacity of this guy to write him the next morning saying, "What's wrong with you? You crapped on my loofah," when it's like, I was trying to sleep with your fiance. I don't see anything wrong with that. That's just how people are, right? Come on, what a loser. Our next story is The Poop Delivery. I can't take credit for this one, but it's too good not to share. I used to live in England in a nice little town. My next-door neighbors were a nice young couple with a baby, probably less than a year old. They kept their front lawn nice and tidy, and for the most part were pretty chill. However, there was a woman who lived in the next street, I could see her house from mine, who walked her dog on the same route every day, and without fail, this dog would choose my neighbor's lawn as the place to drop logs. This wouldn't have been too bad if the woman picked up after her dog, but she didn't, just walked away like nothing had happened. My neighbors tried putting up various little signs about picking up after your dog, but nothing changed. One day, the mother of the baby was just leaving her home just as the woman was walking away, leaving another steaming pile. The mother called out to her to pick up after her dog, but she just kept walking and pretended not to hear. The mother, thinking quickly, disappeared into the house and came back out with a plastic bag. She picked up the poop and followed the woman to her home. For those not from the UK, front doors there have letter boxes through which the mail is delivered. The mother watched the woman go indoors and then delivered the poop, minus the bag, through the letterbox. I watched her do it. The house was very close by, and laughed my head off. The dog never pooped on that lawn ever again. This is another batch of the worst kind of people. Look, I understand that dogs don't really have the continence when they're outside to control where they do their business, right? So not faulting dog owners for that, but the ones that do not pick up after their dogs, yet you deserve to have a steamy, sticky poop log shoved through your mailbox, 100%. LQ4657 replied, "Growing up, we had a neighbor who would walk her dog down the block to our house and let it poop in our yard. Then, as soon as the deed was done, they'd walk straight back home. My dad asked her nicely the first time he witnessed it not to do it again. She had other plans. No surprise that over time he got less and less tolerant. He'd hide inside to catch them in the act, then walk out hollering at them. But the neighbor kept bringing her dog back to our yard, and I cannot remember how long this went on, but eventually my dad decided to wait around the side of the house with a shovel. As soon as the dog finished pooping, he walked around to scoop it up and then followed the neighbor back to her house and dropped the poo in their yard. That's what finally stopped it." Our next story is, I know this has been done many times, but it still feels good to be this petty. A number has been calling my phone for the last several days, not leaving a message. I normally make it a point to not answer unknown calls, but I've been trying to find a specialist doctor, so thought maybe it was connected. Today the number calls and I answered. It's some guy named Joey who asks if this is XXX, my full name, and I say it is. He then goes on to say, I want to talk to you about a house located at XXX, my home address. At this point, I realize it's one of those scammy buy your home for less than it's worth type of places. I cut him off and say, lose my number. Of course, I don't say this nicely. He calls me a bench and hangs up on me. I call back and he answers like this previous conversation never happened. I tell him how dare he call me about to scam, then call me a bench and hang up and tell him I'm going to report him to the state real estate commission. He again calls me a bench and hangs up. Not only did I report him, I signed his number up for Scientology, Faith Ministries, Orkin Pest Control, and Finder, healthcare.gov. In all the signups, I selected prefer a phone call. In the Scientology and Faith Ministries, they wanted a reason for the need. I wrote, I've been working in a scammy industry and I feel I need to get back on the right path to leave this way of life. I love that, and I personally hope that he received all of the phone calls from those ministries. I mean, maybe he turned to God after this. Who knows? Catless Boy Mom replied, I've discovered that I can do a convincing VRU voice. Unrecognized numbers get to go through my, in a few words, tell me what I can help you with. Scammers get stuck in, I didn't understand that. In a few words, tell me what I can help you with, loop. Our next story is, would you like to add the device to your home? Sure. About 5 years ago, I was in a place that shared a wall with a neighbor who would play music loud after 11 p.m., have loud arguments with friends, let his dog crap on the patch of grass outside my path, park his car in the visitor bay so nobody else could park close by, etc. Total jerk. You get the idea. I'd asked him many times to keep the noise down, but he'd reply, everyone is noisy around here. Chill. One day, I was turning on my smart light in my lounge when the app came up with a notification. New device detected. Fancy brand portable air con unit. Would you like to add the device to your home? Well, bearing in mind my lounge is right next to his, there's only one jerk neighbor this device belongs to, so I clicked yes, no further questions. I apparently now have full access to this jerk's aircon unit. Ka-ching! So I plotted my revenge. At the time I was going up for work at 3 a.m., Jerk had gone to sleep at 1 a.m. I think 3 a.m. is the perfect time to set it to full blast 60°C cool air, 61 degrees Fahrenheit. By the time I got to work at 6 a.m., I noticed it was back in quiet mode. What a shame. Set it back into full blast, 16°C, as noisy as possible. I kept this up for about 2 weeks. Shortly after, I noticed an ad pop up on our neighborhood Facebook group for a faulty aircon unit. Collect for free outside my next door's address. It would be rude not to take it. Although I still endure occasionally noisy evenings, my nights have been so much cooler recently. That's amazing, the double whammy of getting revenge on the jerk neighbor, and you get a ballin' AC unit to keep you cool at night. For us cool sleepers out there, that's quite the win. Our next story is, goodbye TV show progress, goodbye watchlist. I, female, 25 years old, was friends with a group, mix 25, for over 7 years. Then I had the worst depressive episode of my life, and they all decided that I was too difficult to be around, spread lies about me to get me ostracized and alienated entirely. It's a long story, but the gist of it is they all abandoned me when I needed them most, and it totally broke me. Fast forward a bit, and see, we used to share a Disney Plus account as a group because one of their parents was paying for it. I realized recently that I was still logged in on my iPad, so I go and delete the profiles for all of them, except for the parents' one, then remake the profiles exactly the same as they were, but now, all of their watch history is gone. Algorithm, gone. Watch list, gone. I know in reality this probably won't hinder them much, unless they were in the middle of a really long TV show, but it just felt good to do something petty and harmless to get back at them after all they did to me. Maybe I'll go back and put them all on junior mode, lol. This is small, in the grand scheme of things. I think far worse things could be done here, but hey, OP if you feel better about yourself by wiping their search history clean. More power to you, great job. Ophelia, 1997, replied, "Oh girl, I had to go through the same. It's heartbreaking because you think you'll last forever, and when you need them the most, they break you. Not on purpose, not to be cruel, just because. Honestly, those friends have no clue how much damage they did and probably won't care. I'm honestly so paranoid since this with new people, but it will get better. You will find your people and find true companionship. Glad that you had some petty revenge because, in my opinion, it's sort of an unhealthy outlet for your hurt and probably anger." Our next story is, making me sing when I'm sick? I'll make you retire. A little context before I start this story. For my high school at least, solo and ensemble participation, for the first round, was mandatory, and the number of kids who went on to further rounds reflected better on the director. To have a kid not participate or drop out was a huge problem. I, 34-year-old female, have never been a petty person, and this was especially true back in high school when this story takes place. Back then, I, 16-year-old female, was truly quite the doormat, but my one source of true pride, nay, vanity, was my singing voice. I was in the top choir in my middle school and consistently performed well in IUL and solo and ensemble competitions. This was Texas, so I was constantly competing with the best high school singers in the state, and I constantly did very well. I never placed below 5th chair, usually placing in 2nd or 3rd. And then, my sophomore year of high school, I developed laryngitis the week of solo and ensemble. I was devastated, but I knew there was no way I could sing and possibly receive a good score, and that was my bigger issue. I was not going to freak with my near-perfect solo and ensemble record, so I went to my choir director, who we'll call Mr. Fish, 50-year-old male. Now, Mr. Fish had been teaching at my high school for some years already and had been doing very well. We'd won competitions, gone on national tours, the whole 9 yards. Great track record. I'd sat out of practices and class earlier in the week, as well as evening rehearsals. Both I and my mother had sent him emails with doctor's notes about my condition, so I felt no guilt going up to him and telling him, as everyone is loading up the bus to head to the competition, that I needed to back out because I was incapable of participating due to my illness. I'd intended to try, but after checking my voice the morning of the competition, it just wasn't going to work. And this man, this mother freaker, looked 16-year-old, nearly voiceless me dead in the eye and said, "Just suck on a lozenge. This is required." So I got in the bus and participated in the solo and ensemble competition like Mr. Fish made me. And just like I knew was going to happen, when it came my turn to sing, I opened my mouth and nothing came out. I got a 16 out of 100 as the final score. Mr. Fish refused to look at me when he handed me my scorecard, but I was ticked. I was humiliated, and I wanted revenge. So junior year comes around. I'm now a 17-year-old female, and I've worked my butt off for this year's solo and ensemble. My voice has never sounded so good. I'm top of the choir. The soprano, who usually beats me out for solos, gets left in the dust. Life is great. Solo and ensemble comes. Participation is required, as usual. I make no indication that my humiliation from last year is still on my mind. I just absolutely knock the competition out of the park and get first chair. Bam! Love it. The entire choir loses their minds when it's announced. No one's made first chair in ages. Holy crap. I let that announcement simmer for a day or so. I can't remember how long, but not too long afterwards, I sent an email to Mr. Fish, our assistant choir director, and the solo and ensemble director, announcing that I would be dropping from first chair. This was a Friday evening, so I knew the havoc it'd wreak. The house phone started ringing almost immediately. This was the early 2000s, and my mom said it was Mr. Fish for me. I answered, and we started off with vague pleasantries before he nearly demanded to know why I was dropping out. God, I can quote the rest of that phone call by heart. Yes, I thought you'd be curious. Do you remember last year's solo and ensemble when I told you I was sick and shouldn't participate, but you made me do it anyway and I humiliated myself? Yes. That's why. Have a good night, Mr. Fish. Click. Mr. Fish announced his retirement not even 3 weeks later, though he finished out the rest of the school year. I made first chair again senior year. Wow, I mean, just the willingness to self-sabotage and sacrifice just to get back at teacher, that is some hardcore, petty, borderline nuclear revenge. Great story. That old cat replied, "Well done, so very well done, OP. When I was in grade school, I played basketball on the school team with my classmates. We had very disparate numbers. In my grade, there were about 11 guys, but 2 grades above us only had 6 guys, and the grade just above us only had 2. The grade just below us only had 3 guys, so in my 6th grade year, there were guys who would play in the junior game who would then have to play in the senior game. And I was irritated that there were some of us who were riding the pine all night long because the coach, Mr. S, only played players who were, frankly, better. To add insult to injury, I noticed Mr. S didn't spend a lot, if any, time with the players who weren't very good. It was like he expected us to be slower training dummies for the starters to maneuver around during practices. I kid you not, I had one classmate, Jay, who was so shy of getting hit in the face, he couldn't catch the basketball because he'd start blinking rapidly if the ball came his way. So why was I spending free time going to practices for games I'd never play, or only get in the game when the starters were exhausted and the loss was a foregone conclusion? So I stopped going to practices. I still went to games and cheered for my teammates. The girls in my class asked me why I wasn't playing. I said the view was better from this side if I wasn't going to play anyway. I know Mr. S noticed me in the crowd, and as word of my feelings got around, I noticed when the team came out of the locker room, he'd check if I was there. And I was. Every home game. At the end of the school year, we had a sports banquet. I'd been in half the basketball season and all of the track and field season, so I went. As Mr. S handed me a ribbon for a win I'd made in track, he said, while shaking my hand, "I hope we'll see you back next year in basketball." I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I'd love to play." There were changes made next year. My friends, who were starters, had never given me flack for dropping out halfway through the season, and I think were glad someone was showing the inequity. Mr. S coached differently. All of us got more court time, and we actually had a more winning season. I knew I'd made a difference when I saw Mr. S patiently working with Jay to desensitize him to a basketball coming at him, so he could catch a pass and take a shot. Our next story is, my sister-in-law didn't want to follow my house rules, so I let her follow mine the hard way. My sister-in-law moved in with us temporarily after she and her boyfriend had a huge fight and she stormed out of their condo. She said she just needed a few days to cool off. That turned into 2 weeks real quick. Before she settled in, I told her upfront, simple rules. Clean up after yourself, no blasting music past 10, and absolutely no smoking outside, since she's a smoker. She nodded. Of course, I totally get it. Promise. Fast forward a week. The house reeked of cigarette smoke. There were dishes piling up, and her Bluetooth speaker was going off like we were in a club. I reminded her nicely at first. She just laughed and said, "You're starting to sound like our mom." And I was like, okay. So the next day, I changed the Wi-Fi password, locked the laundry room, and hid the spare keys to the front gate. When she asked why nothing was working, I told her with a straight face, "Oh, I figured you don't follow the house rule, so you must not need the house privileges either." She sulked for 2 days, then finally cleaned the kitchen and asked for the password back. I made her say, "I will follow the Queen's rules in the Queen's castle." She muttered it like a kid being forced to apologize, but hey, words are words. I handed her the Wi-Fi password like I was granting royal pardon, and guess who's been behaving ever since? Your house, your rules, and again, this is kind of a fun, harmless way to get around that, and ultimately, you got what you wanted. She's playing by the house rules, and all's well in the world. Pearly, 1979, replied, "Man, if someone smoked in my house, I don't care who they are, they would find all their belongings on the front lawn. That is so nasty and disrespectful, man." Our next story is, he's already lost everything. His brother made sure to kick the knife in deeper. This story is old and roughly 40 years in the making. This local farmer basically screwed a group of people by deciding to only pay half for their labor and threatening them to the authorities. The same people he threatened poisoned his field by throwing wildflower seeds all over it. He lost 25 grand cleaning that up the first time and losing 2 to 5K every couple of weeks that they popped up. Someone was regularly throwing wildflower seeds all over his acreage, and whoever is doing it has been really good at it because nobody was able to figure it out how. He lost over $500,000 in the years. He ended up selling the land at a loss to cover his debt to his younger brother. His brother, out of spite, split up the land and sold it off to the neighbors and raked in a huge profit. While he was in town, he watched his brother try to build a handyman business, and his brother found some of the people he threatened and invested in building a rival business, pricing out his brother. The farmer is old as heck now and still several $100,000 in the hole, and has been living in a trailer outside of town working as a farmhand for other farmers. I finally heard the story of why his brother did what he did, and it was his older brother basically scammed the farm from the family over rumors of the younger brother getting some girl pregnant and leaving her. Their father made him leave town to avoid problems. The younger brother made money as a traveling salesman and bought a ranch in Texas where he built a profitable cattle business. The guy that told me this story told me how the wildflower prank was done without anyone catching on. It was the farmer next door's son-in-law. Every time they crop dusted the fields on his relative's field, he would fly over and dump a 50-pound bag of wildflower seeds over his property because he kept stealing the family's hay and never returned some kind of expensive farm tool. Man, revenge of the farmers. Who knew they could be so vindictive and petty? I mean, I'm kind of here for it. Not gonna lie. Future Surprise 7200 replied, "I think this is actually plausible. It wasn't just several packets of seed here and there. It was 50-pound drops at a time, and who knows how often he dropped it. A gentle breeze would spread it through to be more problematic, but it would take a tornado to hit the right area at the right time to clear it, and it's unlikely there's a random erosion in the field for it to be washed away. Wildflowers take root easily, and flowers are also more resistant to herbicides. Herbicides tend to target other common resistant weeds, and many herbicides are intentionally designed not to harm flowers since they attract bees and wasps, pollinators, and certain flowers are said to have natural pesticide properties. People sometimes intentionally plant certain flowers, in controlled amounts, in their garden with certain vegetables because they attract pollinators and may repel pests. Sure, birds may eat some of this seed, but not 50 pounds. Our next story is, I was just pretending to be smart, so no need for my help. Forgot about this story until telling it to some old classmates earlier tonight and figured I'd share here. For context, this happened just over 2 years ago. This starts way back in my sophomore year of high school when I took AP Chemistry with Miss M. That AP Chemistry class was unbelievably frustrating for me because of Miss M. I'm not the smartest person, but I'm a dang hard worker, and because of that, I know that I'm a tactile learner and taking notes is important for me. But Miss M didn't like people taking notes while she talked. We had to copy down what she wrote on the board 10 minutes before she would cover it, and the rest of the class was her talking with us just listening. So I struggled big time and felt like I was playing catch-up all year. For some important context, I went to a pretty competitive high school. A large chunk of the students were the kids of doctors, lawyers, engineers, and pressure was ramped up on all of us because the parents competed with each other through the kids. Thankfully, not mine. For context, my graduating high school class was 756. I'm competitive, so that seared into my brain. I graduated just inside the top 5% at the 34th spot in a class that had 18 valedictorians. My trip up were 2 B pluses, one in each semester of AP Chemistry as a sophomore. 2 of my closest friends were in that class with me. One finished as a valedictorian, and the other somewhere in the high 20s because he got 1 B plus at some point. Again, I know I'm not as smart as most of them, but I know I worked harder. No matter how much effort I poured in, I just couldn't get that A. My mom felt bad for me and arranged an after-school meeting with me, her, and Miss M so we could figure out where my shortcomings are. Miss M really didn't give much feedback and kept talking in circles. After enough probing to understand the vague things, she said the words that seared into my brain. You aren't smart. You just pretend to be smart by hanging out with actually smart people like, insert my close friends here. We were so shocked, we just got up and left. I eventually learned my mom cried all of that night because I shouldn't have had to ever hear those words from a teacher. Thing about me is, I've always been the chip on my shoulder motivation guy. Didn't make the tennis team and told I'm not good enough? Guess I'll train and bypass the JV team and go straight to varsity. Think I'm too thin to play competitive basketball? I'll master my footwork and technique and show you weight doesn't matter. So naturally, her words stuck with me and were my handwritten sign that I would tape above my desk to motivate myself for every academic challenge I faced. Anyways, fast forward about 14 years. I finished med school and I'm a doctor in the middle of my residency. I'd also like to think I'm fairly well adjusted now. I dialed the competitive streak all the way down. I went back to my hometown to visit my parents and my mom asked me to pick up some stuff from the grocery store. As fate would have it, Miss M was there and she recognized me. Not hard. I looked mostly the same, just a bit taller and less baby fat on the face. It's a tight community in that area, so when she struck up conversation, I was cordial. She asked what I was up to, and I gave her the career update. She got excited and began talking about how her daughter's been trying to get into med school, but was rejected the past 2 application cycles. She proceeded to ask me if I know anyone from my old school and can help the daughter get an interview. I was stunned again. I couldn't believe the audacity to ask me for help. It already took so much out of me to not be rude when I saw her. I tried to keep it together and just said no. She was surprised and tried to convince me and was asking if her daughter could email me. I couldn't hold it back anymore and let it rip. I told Miss M that her daughter would benefit from someone who's actually intelligent, not someone who just hangs out with intelligent people and pretends to be smart. I still wasn't satisfied, so I took one extra shot while she kept asking for help by questioning how smart her kid is if someone unintelligent like me got in, but she's struggling. I told my mom when I got home. I think she was more proud of me in that moment than she was when both I got in and attended med school. You know, I would argue that just going on to be a very successful adult and working professional, that's revenge enough, right? Haters definitely take notice of that kind of stuff. No need to hold on to a grudge from high school, just let it go, but I guess if it makes you feel better, whatever, so be it. Mother Goose, 1957, replied, "My daughter's English teacher would not allow her to do English literature when she entered senior high school, years 11 and 12 here. She said my daughter would not be able to cope with it, so she wasn't allowed to even try. My daughter graduated high school, went to university, and got a degree in, you guessed it, literature. In fact, she got a double degree in literature and photography. We made sure the news got back to the school, and that teacher in particular. She's now an author with 8 books published. Teachers should never discourage students who are motivated to learn. Our next story is, take my clothes out of the dryer? Have fun walking home in your underwear. This happened about 15 years ago in Jackson, Mississippi. My then-girlfriend and I were living in an apartment complex in the outskirts of Jackson. We didn't have a washer or dryer in the apartment yet, so we had to use the community coin-operated units attached to the leasing office and pool. One night, after I'd returned home from work, I wanted to get some laundry done so I could just relax the next day. So I took my laundry basket across the parking lot, ran them through the wash cycle, then came back from my unit to put them in the dryer. When I got back to my unit again, I realized a stray wet sock had stuck to the side of the basket, so I had to run back over to throw it in. When I got to the dryer, which was the only one in use at that point, I found my clothes had been removed from the dryer, tossed into the dryer below it, and a few shirts, jeans, and socks in its place. They smelled like chlorine, so I had a pretty good idea of what happened here. To confirm, I snuck around the back and spied the late teens, early 20s swimming in their underwear. It was mid-August, so I figured they jumped in with their sweaty clothes on, then found a paid-for dryer running and decided to save the dollar and screw me over instead. I was pretty mad about what I found, so I switched the clothes back and was about to put their wet clothes in the lower dryer again before I had a better idea. I took their clothes, walked over to the large garbage can, and tossed their clothes under the garage bag between the liner and the inside of the garbage can. Then I waited the last 25 minutes and took my clothes back as quickly as I could. I guess I wasn't quick enough because I heard some panicked voices calling after me when I was almost back inside my apartment. "Hey, excuse me, wait!" I locked the door behind me, but a few seconds later, there was a loud knocking on my door. I opened the door, and before me stood a dripping wet young woman and 2 equally wet young men. They immediately accused me of stealing their clothes. I simply said, "Well, no, see, these are mine." I had the only dryer in use at the time, the top one to the far left. I knew they wouldn't come out and say they stole my dryer, so I just kept staring at them, and then asked if there's anything else they needed. They tried to say that I must have been mistaken. I'd taken their clothes also, so I pulled my laundry basket out and shifted some clothes around and said, "Nope, they're all mine." They were forced to give it up and walk back to wherever they came from in their underwear. The worst part is that it had been a hot and rainy summer up to that point, so the mosquitoes were out in full force. I'm sure that was an itchy walk home. Karma, baby. They had it coming. There's really nothing else to say here. You treat other people's stuff like that, you deserve what you get. Defiant Fellow responded, "When I, male, lived in the dorms, I forgot I had a load in the dryer and rushed down. Found a girl folding my clothes, undies and all. She said she was waiting for her own clothes and thought she'd keep busy. Wish I'd been brave enough to ask her out." Weakest Links replied, "In college, I, your regular male, had laundry machines in my apartment my senior year, and I had 2 female roommates. One time, I left my clothes in the dryer, and one of them needed it, and I was gone, so she folded them. It was really nice. I didn't think about asking her out. And I didn't say anything because she wasn't there when I got back, and then I forgot. Fast forward a month or so later. Our roles were reversed, and I thought I would return the favor. She wasn't rude, but definitely weirded out. I didn't really think it was that weird returning the favor at the time, but whatever. But later thought, and to this day, have been second-guessing myself on if the roommate who folded my laundry is not the same one whose laundry I folded." Our next story is, I inadvertently may have screwed my ex financially. Backstory. My ex and I had been together for 4 years and we broke up this past January. Our breakup was amicable. We were simply in different paths in life, but it crushed me emotionally because it was out of the blue. We lived together for 3.5 years, moved across the country together, and were financially intertwined. All these factors, so you can imagine I believed we were in it for the long haul, but he didn't feel the same way. It's been about 6 months now since our split. We've not spoken since April. We stayed amiable and cordial for the first couple of months, so we still talked. I moved out in February. One of the conversations we had was about his car insurance, and I asked if he can remove me from his policy by the end of May, even though having me on his policy was keeping his insurance rates low. We live in Southern California, so those rates are stupid high, and you do what you can to get a good price. I also asked that he started making payments to me by July, the current month, because he owes me money for his part of our move from the East Coast, a down payment for his BMW that he's got the insurance policy on, and our entire trip for his sister's wedding weekend in a different state because he was not able to pay for it at the time and didn't want to use his credit card. At that time, he agreed. Our fallout started when he asked me to help him move out of the apartment we shared to one across town where he will share with a roommate to alleviate the financial burden on him. I made 2.5 times more than him, so financially I was okay. And I refused. It genuinely hurt me that he would ask me for anything, considering he was the one who broke up with me, and I had already felt like I'm overextending myself by even keeping things amiable when I was deeply hurt by it all. I expressed that clearly. He then blocked me when I told him he didn't deserve me as a friend, and that was that. It took months of healing from a broken heart, but I'm in a good place emotionally now. Now it's July. I've not heard from him, nor do I want to. He's not paid me back the money he owes, but I know his financial situation isn't great. It crossed my mind to see if I had been removed from his car insurance policy. I called the company, and sure enough, I was still on there. I felt a little betrayed, but I wasn't shocked. Again, insurance rates where we live are insane, so I get why he didn't do it. But I asked for the removal by the end of May in our conversation. I asked for my removal, and turns out his insurance on his BMW went up by $200. I no longer have financial ties with him, and he's been blocked across my social media and my phone. If I see the money, I see it. If not, this was an expensive lesson. His Netflix is still signed onto my TV. I won't use it, but I hope he enjoys his shows in Mandarin before logging off for the last time. Well, first of all, OP, glad to hear that you're healing emotionally from this breakup. You're in a much better place now. And honestly, I think ultimately it's probably worth just eating the money to clean break and be free of this relationship. It's not worth pursuing it unless you really need it. Sparkling Rubes commented, I know this is going to be really hard to hear, but he totally did yourself a favor by taking the trash out himself. He bought a BMW but can't afford insurance on it unless you were on his plan. He can't afford not to have roommates, yet has a BMW. He blocked you because you openly and vulnerably told him that you're hurt? Yes, on the surface it seems like he did you dirty, but as an internet stranger, you dodged a bullet. Our next story is, she won't quit. Let's bet. Last week, I was called into work and I was already overstimulated with the job from the day before. I just wanted a day off to relax. I got there. I have to deliver my 200 packages, then deliver another route's 50 plus packages, and plus deliver the mail on top of that. I was on my period, and it was 90 plus degrees out. A coworker seen the look on my face, I guess, and asked if I was thinking about quitting. I said yes. 10 minutes later, I'm walking past him, and a lady that just got hired at our station and who was always complaining about her route and how much she had, etc. I walked past as she was saying, she won't quit. I already knew what I had to do. I was already planning on quitting, but I wasn't quitting that day, at that time. As I'm loading the mail truck, I heard, she won't quit, echo in the back of my head. Really rubbed me the wrong way, because how are you going to say what I will or won't do? I took the rest of my packages inside, placed the mail truck key back on the key hook, and went home. She had to deliver the packages I left. She had to deliver the mail. She probably got over 13 hours that day. Made some money, so it wasn't really petty other than I know she hated every moment of it. She doesn't know my route at all. She hates the heat also, and I don't know. She complained about everything under the sun, so I'm sure she was complaining while she was out there. I left a stressful job. Amen. Good for you, OP, getting the old 2-for-1 special, leaving a stressful job, and also getting petty revenge in the process. Gotta love it. Sea Monkey replied, similar situation happened to me when I was a waitress. My douche of a boss scheduled me a closing shift when he knew I couldn't work that time. I had a toddler and didn't have childcare that late. He told me I had to get it covered by another waitress. I asked all the girls if they could cover. I covered for them multiple times that nobody would cover for me, and they were so rude to me about it. I was planning on quitting, but that was my sign. I turned around and walked out, and they had to cover my shift anyway. All right, everybody, that is all the time we got for today. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and comment down below, and if you want to check out any of our other videos, click the video on the right. I got nothing else for you. I will see you all next time.